So the first question that you posed for me was, what have I seen happen over the 15 years that I've been visiting South America in terms of people's communication skills or their capabilities as a result of digital technology proliferating even up in the jungle? The short answer is that they are much, much more facile at communicating within the Spanish culture. It's just like here in the States. They flip open a cell phone and they're instantaneously communicating with people, making logistical arrangements. So it facilitates communication there the same way it would here. Has it helped the indigenous people with whom I'm most familiar? Absolutely, yeah. Augustine told me on more than one occasion that it's the Emory University Oxford College group that have pushed him to A, become much more facile in his use of English, and B, begin to use digital technology to communicate with Juan and other people as well. So yes, it's a much more pronounced part of their culture. When I first went down there, I mean, you've been to Rio Blanco, as has Heather. There was no way to communicate with anybody outside that region. In 2006, my mother was ill, and I knew she was ill before I left to take the program to Ecuador. And I got up in the morning in Rio Blanco, and Juan Gabriel came, remember that little footbridge? And Juan came across that footbridge and said, "Your mother's in the hospital and there's some concern for her health." And I looked at him in total incredulousness and said, "I realize that we're in a deeply shamanic culture, but how can you possibly know this? My mother's in a hospital in Gainesville, Florida." And he said that he had gone up to the top of the ridge where he was then able to get a cell phone signal and communicate with his office, and there was the message in his office in Cuenca for me regarding my mother. So it's the digitalization of that context has top to bottom changed in ways that you could predict that because they're parallel to how we do it here in the States. In terms of the change, is it something that somebody would endorse or that somebody would be skeptical about? Yes. Of course, it allows people to be connected and it facilitates conversations of all kinds. So yes. I mean, how could one be opposed to it? I mean, anything that facilitates people getting the job done. Again, as an alumni of having been down there yourself, you know that the messages have to travel over very, very long distances in terms of when people are going to show up, what the needs are. So that's a big thumbs up. Could it produce a sort of a cultural flattening that some critics of globalization have alleged? George Ritzer, in his text, The Globalization of Nothing. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, very rarely does social change come and produce only one intended consequence. I mean, sociologists are adept at looking at cause and effect relationships in a social context. And we know that whenever we produce change, there are the hoped for manifest consequences. And then there's always what you don't know that you don't know. Have you ever had a chance to look at Mark Bauerlein's book, in which he takes a very critical look at... Yeah.
We actually interviewed him.
Okay. Well, he talks about what he argues that historically that young people passing into adolescence wanted to pass through that developmental phase as rapidly as they possibly could because the good stuff synonymous with adult status was on the other end. And Mark argues, and plausibly so, that cell phone use and texting and all the ways that people have of instantaneously communicating holds people in a sort of an infantile version of adolescent culture longer than might have been the case in the past. I don't think anybody anticipated that it would sort of stretch out the length of an adolescent culture. But I have to argue as a social scientist that if you put a cell phone in the hands of indigenous people and then beam a signal in on them, it has to have consequences that we can anticipate, and it has to have consequences that we cannot anticipate. I think one of the consequences that we can anticipate is, and I know that honest people can disagree about this, but I'm alive to the idea, maybe more than some of my colleagues are, that a lot of globalization is the Americanization of. And I wonder if there will be an Americanization of, a commercialization of adolescence or of indigenous culture as a consequence of the proliferation of this technology. On the other hand, and this is something that you and Heather and I have talked about while we have been in Ecuador, why would we deny to other people the prerogatives that we so freely use here in the States? Because we have some romantic view of preserving their culture so that we can drop in on it every year and it doesn't change. Because we're searching for that really authentic experience in a place that's unlike our own. And maybe we see cell phones and the proliferation of digital technology is eroding that authentic otherness. But as soon as you start to think about those issues, you realize it's not an ethical position that one can hold on to, is that you can't use this technology because I want you to be different from me. So it's coming. In the years that I've been going to Rio Blanco, I've been down there 17 times. It's more and more and more plugged in. But on the other hand, it still gives us that authentic experience that we're looking for. So yes, it absolutely does have all the positive impacts of easy communication. Generically, the question for a good social scientist will be, what will the nature of those communications be? And how would that shape one's sense of self or shape the culture of these indigenous groups?